All right. Welcome, everyone. We're so glad to have you with us. This is the Institute for Interconnected Education, and we're just trying to provide a webinar to talk about some tips, tricks, ideas, strategies for e-learning from an administrative perspective, from a teaching and learning perspective. I have got a lovely panel of people who are assembled. They have been doing e-learning for a long time. They've really been in the trenches. They were, I think everybody on this panel was doing this back when it started. So we have the benefit of having learned some lessons early on. And I think you're going to get to hear some of those lessons come out as we go through this stuff today. Let me just really quickly talk about our agenda, and then I'll introduce everybody. So first of all, we'll go through some introductions. You'll get to know who the folks are that are on the call. And then we're going to talk about some very specific ideas and strategies. Emma is going to talk to us about humanizing online education. Teresa is going to speak to the faculty lounge concept and what that can look like. Gretchen will talk a little bit about slowing down, breathing, and using what you know to be successful. Aaron is going to talk about how this probably isn't the best time to assess online efficacy. I'm going to come in at the end and talk a little bit about generative learning, which actually ties to a blog on the IICE website from last week. And then if we have time, we might add a couple of other tips or tricks along the way. Maybe we will, maybe we won't. And then finally, we'll wrap up. I have asked everybody on the call to really treat this as just an opportunity to talk and discuss. There is, I'm gonna guess somewhere in the 110 to 120 years of education experience on this panel. If you were to add us all together, and then when you go online, maybe not quite so much for online, but pretty darn close. So I've asked everyone to just sort of interject when they have an idea or a thought, and they've all agreed to do that. So let me start by letting you know who we're working with. Everyone that you are going to hear from today is a faculty or fellow with the Institute for Interconnected Education. My name is Jeff Borden. I am the executive director of the Institute. I've been teaching online since 1997. I think I was the first graduate assistant to teach online at the University of Northern Colorado. I was the Blackboard liaison for the Metro State College of Denver back in the early 2000s. And I began working at a company called eCollege, which provided an LMS for a lot of schools around the country. I'm going to introduce people in the order in which I met them and how long I've known them. And so Erin would be next, because she actually was at eCollege, and she was in the hiring committee that brought me on board with eCollege. Erin has been an instructional designer, a learning designer. She works a lot with different WASC and accreditation components for different schools, as well as some of the schools she's worked with. She is definitely a guru when it comes to e-learning, so we're excited to have her. Thanks for being here, Erin. Next, I think the next person that I met on our panel here was Teresa Umscheid. She's the director of the Iowa Community College Online Consortium currently. She brought me to one of their first conferences, and I've spoken at many of their conferences since. Teresa has really been somebody who over the years has really experienced a lot in terms of how to help students succeed with student success metrics, with student affairs, kind of student services metrics, with academic metrics, with all kinds of things. She's been at the forefront of doing that for a massive community college system. Similarly, I think probably within hours, I then met Gretchen Bartleson. She is currently a dean at one of those community college schools, Northwest Iowa Community College. But she also is a member of the collaborative team that works with the ICCOC. And she, again, has been teaching online for a very long time. And she was a pioneer in this space, calls herself the queen of disruption, and I think you'll probably see why here in just a little bit. And then the person I have known the least amount of time, although I still have known her for a number of years, is Dr. Emma Zone. And Emma and I have known each other through a couple of different positions, working at a couple different schools, but also as she worked with Faculty Guild and really provided professional development around all teaching and learning, not just online, but definitely including online, for a long time, helping teachers be better teachers, helping practitioners, instructors, professors just do what they do better at scale. So that's our panel that you're going to hear from today. And then finally, last thing I'll say, and then I'm going to turn it over to our first presenter, which will be Emma. You are going to hear tips, tricks, ideas, and strategies today. I hope that you grab a pen or pencil and maybe take some notes. I think you're going to get a wealth of information. You can obviously go back and rewind and watch this video over and over again. But some of the kinds of things you will hear again are maybe administrator to faculty centric, talking about how you work with your pool of professors. That may include things like working from home, working remotely, helping people get up and running. This is designed to help people kind of take on the mindset, you know, if we had known then what we know now, how would we have done e-learning differently? You'll hear that sort of come out as we go. And you'll also hear some very pragmatic, practical stuff from a teaching and learning perspective. I put up a clip of my screen here. This is just a simple text file that I keep. I have one of these for every discussion that I've kept one of these ever since I started doing this, because many times the comments and suggestions and conversation going on in those discussions, I know what they're going to be. They're the same term after term after term. This way I can simply go back, copy and paste what I said last semester, and then just tweak it a little bit. Saves me a lot of time, and it helps me just, you know, make these answers better and better over time. So you're going to hear ideas of both sorts as we go through this today. All right. So with that said, that's plenty of talking for me for now. I'll come back and share some ideas in just a little bit. But at this point, what we're going to do is we're going to go back and we're going to hear from Emma Zone. And she's going to talk a little bit about humanizing online education. Emma?
Thanks, Jeff. And thanks everybody for tuning in. This is going to be a great panel. You know, over the last few weeks, I've been reflecting quite a bit, because not only have I been helping my colleagues in the higher education space as they transition to online, but as many of you know, we have P-12 educators for the first time stepping their toe into the water with how to provide some type of remote teaching or online learning, or e-learning as we call it, depending on your district. And I know we're going to talk a little bit about why this isn't the time to assess any of those things, and how we really need to have a need it now mentality. But when Jeff raised the idea of putting this panel together, and I was thinking back to one of the first times that I interacted in an online course setting, the first thing that came to mind is just how to make this a more humanized experience. You might be familiar with the work of Michelle Pacansky-Brock in California. She writes quite a bit on this, and I'm going to share one of her great infographics that talks about humanizing online education. But I just want to speak about it just from the standpoint of why the simple things matter, and helping students feel connected online, and helping faculty feel connected as well. So the first thing that I'll say is, don't underestimate the importance of students being able to see who you are, whether that is posting ongoing videos, or posting a picture of yourself. Posting a picture of your pet, interestingly, can get a lot of kind of initial jitters out of the way. When students start to see who you are, what you look like, what you sound like, what's important to you, that immediately diffuses a concern about the sort of wizard behind the curtain mentality that all of us can feel in an online environment. So we know that it's, you know, best practice to definitely post pictures when you can, particularly if it's the start of the term, but also use video in a way that's intentional and warm. So not just as a way to kind of spill out information, but also as a way to show caring for your students. So one example of what I did this week, I always do video announcements to go along with my written announcements for students. But this week I also popped on and I did a quick little video about self-care, and just letting them know about some of the resources that the institution for which I teach has for self-care kinds of opportunities, whether that's a student sort of resource center or whatever it happens to be. I was surprised at how many responses I got from students about that video, as opposed to some of what I had posted about content. So let some of that humanized approach of caring supersede the content, particularly in this time when students are feeling stressed. Making sure that we're taking care of their Maslow needs, not just their Bloom needs, and making sure that we're finding a way to help them feel connected. The other thing that I'll say is don't underestimate the use of first names. Again, something simple, but anytime I'm replying to students, I use their preferred name, especially after they've maybe introduced themselves early on in the course. Sounds like a small thing, but not only do I use their first name, but I sign all of my posts as well so that they feel like this is a conversation that we're having and that the human being is present behind those interactions that they have. I think that's extremely important. And then the third thing that I will say, just in terms of the humanizing approach, is to help students find connections with one another. I think, like Jeff, I use a repository of comments oftentimes when I've taught the same material time and time again. It comes in very handy. It's a great time saver. But in addition to doing that, look for ways to engage with students that will connect them to one another. So if you see two students posting about something that's a similar theme, or maybe they have similar backgrounds, if they've shared something about what they do professionally, or even some sort of extracurricular interest, keep that in mind. And then when they're posting week over week, particularly if you do have active discussion boards, try to find ways to not just always interject content or to be the expert, but instead to sort of walk alongside your students and find ways to validate when they are having good conversations and interject words of encouragement or using that appreciative inquiry approach to help keep the conversation going without hijacking it in a way that makes it seem like you're the expert and they are, they don't have anything to add. So just sort of be careful with that and find ways to connect commonalities. So I referenced Michelle Pacansky-Brock. She's really a guru in this space if you're not familiar with her work. I'm going to post something in the chat, but I did want to share one of her infographics if you're looking for just that quick reference. I know we're all in sort of that need it now mentality. Hopefully someday you'll be able to go back and really dive into some of the research on online teaching and learning. But I just want to share quickly this one infographic of hers, and hopefully you all can see it. I don't know if one of my team members can come on and say thumbs up or thumbs down. I can't see Zoom at the same time, so.
I'll let you know if it comes up. It hasn't come up yet.
Okay, maybe it's bandwidth, maybe not.
There we go. Something's coming up.
Okay.
Yeah, got it.
Okay, great. So this is actually a PDF. She has this in lots of different forms, and I'll go ahead and post this particular link in the chat. It's also on her blog. But this is one of my favorite go-tos for new faculty who are exploring this work around humanizing online education, whether it's using videos, whether it's how you facilitate appropriately. We're sort of all in not the best case scenario for course design at this point, but this can be a really helpful sort of one pager if you want to kind of get into this idea of community of inquiry and how you actually begin to think about online courses in a way that help keep the humans at the forefront. And so I'm not going to go through the whole thing, but it is a really great resource for people to be able to have a kind of quick tips around humanizing online courses and online facilitation. So I'll put that in the chat while my colleagues are sharing their bits as well. But hopefully that's helpful for some of you, not to underestimate the power of the human presence and to be present in the teaching that you're doing, particularly during this time when students are feeling disconnected, isolated, missing that social interaction, and really craving a way to connect not only with their peers, but also their faculty members. So make sure you're keeping that at the forefront. That would be probably my biggest tip as we're sort of starting off on this journey in these unprecedented times.
There we go. I was muted, sorry. Thank you so much. That's brilliant. I'm going to totally take this opportunity for a horrific pitch, and I apologize for doing this. I'm part of a curated book that is being put together by HETL around the humanization of online learning, and it's supposed to come out this fall. So I actually have a chapter in there, and it speaks to a lot of the things that you were just talking about. So be on the lookout for that. That's coming. But I was thinking of something that I know I have shared with some of the folks in Iowa back in the day when we were working on this, and that Aaron and I had many powwows about in the instructional design team that we started at together. And that is the use of Audacity. I know it's an old school tool. It's just an MP4 creator. I bet we used to be an MP3 creator back when that was the go-to file. But I open up Audacity. It's free. Anybody can go get it right now. They're not sponsoring this. You can go get Audacity, and it's this tiny little piece of software that means you don't have to use your phone. Although you certainly could. You could use your phone if you don't mind taking up the space on your phone. But you can use Audacity and just speak in your microphone. What I do is I bring up my students' speeches or their papers or whatever it is that I'm evaluating, and I will talk into Audacity as I'm going. So I'll have the rubric open, I'll have the assignment open, and I'll have Audacity open. And I'll actually just say, hey, I'm in the third paragraph right now. It seems like maybe you've gone away from some of your credibility statements that you started with in the first paragraph or at the opening of your speech or whatever it might be. Here's how I'd recommend getting back to that. And then I'll hit pause and I'll go through and I'll watch more or read more or whatever it is I'm doing, filling out the rubric. And then when I'm done, I simply upload 2 files rather than uploading 1. I upload the rubric and I upload the Audacity file. And it also saves me from having to type out all of those comments all the time. My students love it. They absolutely love it. They say that it's like a coach standing over their shoulder, really giving them guidance. So I don't know, that's all I could think of as you were talking there, Emma, is that example. I'd love to hear, Aaron, Teresa, Gretch, are there any other thoughts that you have about that?
I think what Emma was talking about makes an awful lot of sense, of course. And I also have to keep in mind the sort of generational needs. And so when I first started teaching online, like Jeff, 97, and a lot of it just by way of the technology that was available, everything was in writing. That was one of the things that actually drew me to it, is my background's in English writing. But it also means that I got very used to giving feedback in writing. And it really, honestly, until about a year ago, did it even dawn on me that maybe I could use recording and that maybe the students would appreciate that more, even if it wasn't the natural way that I did grading. So what you're talking about, Jeff, I think makes a lot of sense. Know your audience, just with anything that you do, whether you're teaching, whether you're giving a conference presentation, whether you're writing a book or a blog, you have to know who your main audience is. And when we're looking at our students, we need to cater to what the majority of them need.
I was thinking too, when you were talking about Audacity, it's funny how there's always a new tool or there's new software, something that they can use, but sometimes it's going back to the easy way of doing it that you're comfortable with. And by focusing on something that you are comfortable with and that you can use to connect with your students might be better than trying to go with the latest and greatest technology, because you have to spend time learning it. And then that's hard for both maybe the students and the instructor to keep up with. So I think trying not always to be on the cutting edge of whatever new trend, or not new trend, but new software or tool is out there is important to understand too. You don't have to have video and audio and all of the things. You can sometimes just use what you're comfortable with.
Yeah, Emma said, keep it simple. I agree.
Mm.
I remember what Jeff told us years ago, at least told me. I don't know if he told everybody else, but he probably did. Just because there's a tool, you don't have to use it. What do you want to do? Then find the tool that will do what you want it to do. And there are so many tools available to us now, and you don't have to use them all. If they don't fit, don't do it.
Yeah. Well, nicely done, Emma. You can see you sparked a lot of thought and conversation. Well done. I think now we can transition that's a great transition actually from my perspective, because one of the things that is going to be in that book that I referred to is the notion that brain science actually supports all this. And there are kind of 2 competing neurotransmitters that you're dealing with when you start talking about humanization or connection between humans. There's glutamate, which too much of it really is a bad thing. It produces stress. It actually eats neurons. And oxytocin, which is the thing that really makes a person feel connected to someone else. And I think that's not just important inside the classroom, but I think Teresa's going to talk a little bit about how that's also important for all that are dealing with remote learning at this time. So I'll turn it over to you, Teresa, to talk a little bit about the Faculty Lounge.
Okay, thanks, Jeff. As I was listening to Emma talk, it really connected with what I was thinking about for faculty. A couple of weeks ago when this all started and everything was moving to online, I think all of us in online learning were like, well, you know, we need to get training and we need to get courses built. We thought about the technical, the mechanical aspects of online learning. And of course, you know, we're using a new tool for faculty who aren't used to that. They may have used it for their gradebook or their syllabus, but really for teaching completely online, it was a foreign language for them. And it took me a while. And being the director of a consortium, I'm not connected directly to one college, but before I was the director for the consortium, I was a director for one of the community colleges, and my office is still housed there. So I do get to be interactive with that campus and those faculty a little bit, but not as much as I used to. But I immediately went into the mode of getting things set up, getting training going. What do we need? Looking at textbooks, you know, all of that. And then I was invited to a meeting this week on Monday, and it was a faculty meeting. And it was the first time everybody was working from home. And when I sat down at the meeting, and I laughed when Emma said this, is the first instructor picks up a puppy, and she had a puppy at her home. They raise puppies. And so then everybody started bringing in their pet that happened to be in the room with them. One guy had a snake. At that time, I was really glad we were doing social distancing, but it was just interesting because you could see the walls come down with those pets. And it was kind of before the meeting started, and everybody started joking, and this is my dog, this is my cat. And it started kind of becoming apparent to me that this was important, this humanizing of faculty. Even though they saw each other every day on the campus, you were kind of seeing a different aspect of them. They're in their homes, they're with their pets. And then I started seeing that they were going to actually miss each other. These are people that see each other every single day. They talk in the workroom or the mailroom or wherever they gather for coffee. And that was really became apparent, is that they're not going to be able to see each other every morning. And there was a sense of, you know, I'm alone in this. And so as that meeting progressed and they were talking about best practices in teaching and what they could do, I suggested having a faculty meeting, and I was thinking once a week, but we ended up doing it every single morning at from 9 until 10. If you could make it only on Tuesdays, that's great. If you could make it every day, that's great. Sometimes administrators would pop in, sometimes they don't. It's not a formal environment at all, but it's a great place to go to say, hey, this is what I learned today. And it might be something that maybe we know that teach online or that work with people who teach online. We may have known that for a long time, but sometimes coming from somebody else who just learned it or who is excited about just learning it is more important for the other faculty than for somebody who's been doing it a long time. I feel like that sometimes when I talk about it, they're like, oh, that's the online lady. She, you know, that's all she talks about. But whenever you start to see these faculty who are not used to that environment, not used to teaching that way, get excited about what they're learning and say, you know, this isn't as hard as I thought it was going to be. Or did you know you could do this in Canvas, you know, and did you know that you could upload, you know, your file or whatever. And so I was really excited about the conversation. And as the week has gone on, and I've tuned in a couple of times just to basically listen, but it's been very, very nice to hear them share ideas and see how they've grown in just a few weeks or just a few days. Sorry, it seems like several weeks in 1 week. But we also have faculty who teach on campus, and they have taught online for a long time, and they're in this faculty lounge as well, and they are able to share a little bit about what they do and what they've done in the past. And I think some of our face-to-face faculty are realizing, I don't have to do video conferencing a lecture to them. I can use these other tools, and so they're learning from each other. And it's actually as much or more beneficial than the planned training that we do and hold. It's more just tossing around ideas. And I think it's been a great experience for all of us. And And I hope that when we come back together on campus, that the experience that they've had in the faculty lounge is something they laugh about or joke about or continue to talk about.
Wow, that's I remember the days when you guys first started doing some of that stuff, and how people started to gel, and that certainly is something that I agree, it's near and dear to my heart. I actually, the first thing that came to my mind was when I started working with Emma, we were actually working on the courseware and context framework that is really designed to sort of help people pick courseware, pick assets and educational things like that. And on that committee, on that board that we sat on, there were folks, brilliant educators like Christy Ford and Tanya Justin, and just other people who have been doing this for a really long time. And some of our best conversations happened at the dinners when we would all get together, that night. And I know that also applies to some of the stuff that we did, when I would come back and speak at the conferences, some of those conversations at night, and they evolved or devolved, I guess, depending on how you look at it, into work stuff. And then they would come back out into social stuff and then back into work stuff. And I feel like we sometimes got more done there than we did in the dedicated hour meeting that we had during the day. So
I agree.
Yeah.
I think seeing also for these people who are, home, and it's seeing a friendly face.
Yeah.
There's a lot of stress, not just about the teaching and how am I going to do this and how am I going to connect, but about life in general. There's a lot of stress. And, just being, I don't want to say isolated, but kind of isolated.
Right.
It's nice to see that friendly face that you see every day, and
Yeah.
just taking that stress away. And I think that you're right. It's a more casual environment. So sometimes ideas flow better in a more casual environment.
Yeah. I don't know, Emma, do you think back on those meetings the same way?
Yeah, it's funny you say that. I mean, and also like in the work that we've done with Faculty Guild, it's been all based on communities of practice. And what's been interesting in that work is just seeing how people, they have a real need to share, I think, parts of their life outside of their identity as teacher and learner. It's really kind of interesting, and how they end up connecting. I mean, one of my favorite things about that work is that we've seen people who didn't never know each other face to face, were only online, and realized they lived in close geographic proximity and ended up going for coffee after that experience. So kind of the reverse of what we're talking about, but still, certainly interesting. And then it also provides that connection for ongoing collaboration long after the task at hand is complete. I mean, that's what we're doing right now, if you think about it. So for sure.
Nice. Well, thank you, Teresa. I think that's, again, you've gotten a lot. Aaron, were you going to jump in?
I was, just for a moment, to say that, as much as especially this group here probably realizes and understands how powerful online and asynchronous and at distance education works, we do crave that human connection. And of course, that's more pertinent now than ever. And so I'm used to working from home. I go and I visit my campus in California once a month, generally. They're all working from home now and really struggling with just what you were talking about, Teresa, that human component. So our president actually implemented Wellness Wednesdays, where everybody meets on Zoom. We we have an opportunity to talk about what's going well, what's not going well. It just talk. And yeah, like you said, some people say, like, here's my pets. And so we have an opportunity to see people, one, and less casual in more casual circumstances, for sure, and then also more about them than what they're doing at work. But people are really craving those connections, which of course are important.
Very good. Thanks, you guys. I think this also then ties nicely in. I think you'll see the flow here. Gretchen is going to talk to us about again, how to kind of take the concepts of what we know. Let's slow down. Let's center ourselves. Breathe a little bit, and then use what you know in order to be successful. And I think this will probably touch a little bit on both sides, perhaps administrative ed, teaching and learning. Yeah.
More admin. Let me get my screen here. Oh, I disappeared. Just a moment. Let me unshare myself. Well, no, that's okay. I'm going to move over and show you what we've been doing. I've been thinking about this more as an administrator. I work for a community college, and we have a large technical faculty who never, ever, ever, ever were going to teach online. And we had 3 days to get them online. And I learned from them so many really cool things. And I'll get to those in a minute. But the first thing that was running through my mind all week was that scene from the movie Apollo 13, where John Glenn's character says, "I don't care what it was designed to do. I want to know what it will do. We've got these people this far, we're going to bring them all the way home, and nobody's going to die on my watch." And that's how we approached it. I walked into training truck and diesel faculty, heavy equipment faculty, welding faculty, power linemen. Teach online, it was so foreign to them, and they were so resistant to it. So number one, I learned to listen. I had to step back, not tell them what was the best thing to do, although probably have a better idea than some of them, but what do they need? What are they concerned about? I listened a lot. One of my faculty just said, "Will you quit trying to drive with the mouse and just let me do it? I teach hands-on people. I am a hands-on person. Let me be a hands-on person." So we did. We slowed down, we backed up, we listened, and what was amazing was what I learned. There are tools we have that we can use differently. We don't have to do it the same old way. When I was sitting there thinking, gosh, how do I get PDFs from students to do this, that, or the other thing, one of the younger faculty said, "Well, just have them take a picture and send it to me." I don't think about taking pictures that way, and I don't think about using video except on vacation. And so they're saying, "Oh, I'll just have the students go out to the car, show me something, take a video, and send it back." We could all be doing this. So I listened and I learned, and I began to think differently about even what our traditional liberal arts faculty could do online. The other really cool thing we did, you can look at my dashboard here. All of these course shells that are on my dashboard are for non-instructional use. We have a whole thing for the whole college on how to work remotely. I've got my boss running one on student and academic services. We got so many discussions going as mini blogs on how we're solving issues about grades and whether or not we should be in the dorm. The executive council has one. Our non-credit people have one. We are using our learning management platform for everything. Everybody's busy working in there, and then we don't have to be on Zooms all day long. So I think this has been a wonderful opportunity for me to not do it my way, and to learn to listen and to come up with all kinds of new ideas based on individual needs. And I think that's been a really good learning experience for me and for the whole college. And because I did finally stop and listen to the faculty, I think they're going farther than they would have ever thought they would go. So that would be the number one thing I did. The second thing was to take this a step at a time. When I started hearing major university presidents saying, "Oh, we're just going to go online," you know, I thought I had a coronary. In fact, I wanted to have somebody who could do CPR when we were going to tell faculty that this is what they were going to have to do. But we are taking it one step at a time. Usually I want a whole course developed and fully online before you teach it. Well, that's not going to happen right now. So what do we do this week? And then now that we know that we're going 3 weeks, now what are we going to do in these next 3 weeks? And so now we're moving into the phase of took a deep breath, got through week 1, all online. Now what's week 2? And I'm getting really terrific questions from faculty. Radiological technology instructor. How do I make this lecture thing work better? It's not working for me. Electrical students, yeah, they're just not logging on. How am I going to get to them? So we're learning day by day. I think we'll be a stronger college at the end of it. But hopefully I'm calmed down and I'm learning some things. It's been hard, but fun.
That's thank you for sharing all that. I'm sure that there's a ton of nodding or at least gnashing of teeth going on as people are watching this right now who are in the same boat. I had asked everybody to go ahead and let's interject along the way, but I think what you're talking about and what Aaron is going to talk about really seamlessly kind of slide together. So let's go right into Aaron's, and then we'll have a bit of a conversation after that, a bit of a roundtable. Aaron's going to talk about how this probably isn't the best time to assess the efficacy of online learning based on much of what you just heard from Gretch. So yeah, let's slide into that, and then we'll have a little bit of a conversation about both these things. I think they'll dovetail nicely.
Okay, great, thank you. And as would have it with any sort of live presentation, now is when the trash truck has decided to come in front. So I apologize for any additional audio. But yeah, I mean, I think really as much of a proponent as I am for online, and as initially excited as I got when Gretchen said, oh, something like, we are going to have to put everything online right now. And I thought initially, yeah, great. Finally, it's going to come to a chance where everybody has this wonderful opportunity to be online, to experience it. And sometimes, especially with the folks that we have now, a lot of you who are tuning in, you've probably done this for a long time. And we tend to forget, or as Gretchen was mentioning too, we tend to have our own fixed ways. And sometimes having been in this forum for a long time, we become very natural at things we've always done. And it does become interesting to start hearing new ideas and new ways of doing things, which I think is really important and one of the great learning opportunities that have come out of all of this. On the flip side, as I started thinking more and more about this and having conversations with colleagues and friends and reaching out to people saying, I've done this for a long time. If you want any helps or tips, let me know. And then I had a conversation with some of our NILOA coaches, that's the National Institute for Learning Outcomes Assessment. And Natasha Jankowski, who's the director of NILOA, said something like, now is not the time that we really want to start measuring the efficiency or the effectiveness of online learning. And then I started pondering this idea more and more and suggested it to Jeff as we were thinking about this panel. And then just yesterday, the Chronicle of Higher Ed came out with a very similar article that said, let's not use this opportunity to assess online learning just yet. Of course, it's giving us a great opportunity to continue education where without the technology, without the ability to go online, a lot of these educational pieces, especially from K-12, would have to stop. And so I think of course, it's a wonderful opportunity that's allowed in this crisis time continuing of education, which of course is really important. On the flip side, and my panel members here, my colleagues here know all too well that we've probably been in this boat of defending, the efficiency, the effectiveness of online learning for many, many years. And those who really don't want to teach online still have a lot of good arguments and a lot of not so good arguments of why it doesn't work. I think now too, a lot of people are going to use this opportunity to say, see, I told you we couldn't do this online. But the whole idea too, and Emma even talked about the humanizing aspect, when you develop online, it has to be very intentional to be effective. It needs, not that we can't do things on the fly, not that we can't build things up and allow the education to continue as we pivot very quickly in this time of crisis to allow this educational opportunity to continue. But this really isn't the way that it's done. And so as we think about intentional instructional design, intentional humanizing as we design courses, Gretchen said, I like to have my whole course designed before it's taught. I mean, there's a lot of intentionality that goes into building an effective online educational forum. And we just don't have the luxury to do that right now, or many people don't. And even if instructors or schools are used to having online education already, we have to realize too that people are in a different place. This crisis has had more people out of jobs. They may probably have children that are at home that they are working with as well, spouses. Maybe they're taking care of sick people. Maybe they're getting sick themselves. My school that I work for has a lot of Chinese students, and they went home for the Lunar New Year and lunar celebration, and they're not able to come back to the United States. They can, in fact, still get online. They can work remotely, which is great, but they're missing, a lot of that opportunity for what we had for face-to-face, but they're also in crisis mode. So we have to be cognizant of that as well. And while this opportunity is great for remote teaching, and I'll make that distinction between what a lot of people are doing now when they have to get their content on quickly and they're using a lot of synchronous technology, it's remote teaching, and that's great, but it's not necessarily online learning or effective online education. So I see in an assess listserv that I'm on as well, people are saying, well, how are you really going to assess how everything went this term? You know, whether the students like the online learning, whether or not it's effective. And my reaction to that is and thankfully some on the assessment listserv are saying, this is not the time to assess this because it's not really the way we intentionally design that online learning space to be. So I just wanted to bring up sort of a cautionary element that while it's great and it is getting people's, a lot of people's toes wet that maybe wouldn't have before, and it is generating some excitement in a lot of realms, which is great, but I don't think this is the opportunity to say, hey, let's really see how effective online education is, because this is, it takes training, as was mentioned too. Faculty and students need to be trained. So a lot of pieces are missing that go into what we know to build effective online. And while I think it's great on one hand, and I hope a lot of people are in fact enjoying it, we have to understand that there are a lot of elements that are missing at this point in time.
I like what you said, calling it remote learning, because I think that's the better description, and I think I'm going to just change my language. I do think that what I'll see at my college out of this is more of a flipped classroom going forward. Maybe some of our faculty will finally get what we've meant by that and will improve their face-to-face teaching. I'm very grateful that we're 20 years into online learning at our college before this crisis hit. I'm very grateful we have the infrastructure in place to do it. I didn't have to create course shells for everybody. I didn't have to find a solution to teach online. That's all good. Faculty were somewhat familiar. But it should be really interesting at the end of the day who really uses what they've learned, what they're doing, and who doesn't. And I think it's a good opportunity for us, but it's what we've done this last few weeks is not real online learning. It is remote, and I like that distinction. That's a good one.
So again, a quick shameless plug. The blog last week was a little bit about some of this without going into all of the apologetics that you could certainly have. And just as a precursor, Erin wrote the blog for next week. So the Monday, you'll get to see a blog from Erin, which I'm excited to post. The one thing I'll say, and then I'd love to hear from Emma and Teresa about their thoughts on both of these and how they come together. Jacobson wrote The Future of Work, I think is the name of the book, suggesting that the things that a company looks for in its employees have changed over the last couple of years. And they were really the same for 50 years before this. But now they want people, one of those factors, one of those things that they're looking for are potential employees who embrace change. They like change. Not that they'll just accept change, but that they like it. They want to see how it helps them, how they can do new things, those sorts of things. And one of my arguments about this experience right now is, what better time to show our students how we can embrace change, how we can actually, model it, not just tell them that they should be good at changing, even though we are not good at changing. Now is a great time to model some change. So Emma, Teresa, I know you've been listening to these two kind of talk, and I hope you see the dovetailing like I did. I'd love to hear your thoughts.
I think that Erin, you talked about intentionality, and that's 100% an important piece of this puzzle that I think a lot of people need to remember, that there is a huge amount of intentionality related to everything from, you talked about training, course design, etc. But there's also, I think, a missing piece that a lot of institutions are grappling with right now, related to what this means for their policies, and being really unsure of how they can fit their current institutional policy and even, federal law when it comes to this new way of learning for them, because they haven't had to think through this particular use case. So I had faculty friends who teach at a small liberal arts school in Pennsylvania asking me very honestly about using Zoom and FERPA and what that means, not because they're ignorant or, aren't worried about it, but because they've never had to think about it in this particular context. And so, when I think about my former role as a vice provost and I think of that administration hat, we also have to remember that administrators have to think about this in a different way too, and are grappling with policy decisions that look and feel very different than maybe their academic catalog, their faculty handbooks, and that's a real question mark as well. So it's not just about the immediacy of the teaching and learning environment. It's really all of those ripple effects that we're going to start to see.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think too, a lot of the regulations that are out there that are being relaxed or even waived at this point, once this crisis is over, will need to be revisited. I know a lot of the state authorization pieces, for instance, are being relaxed, and that's certainly something that we have to keep in mind if we're, teaching across the country, and FERPA, of course. Yeah, so absolutely, good points.
Kind of on a different note, but one of the things that faculty were curious about is, test proctoring and making sure that everything was secure, and we do have a remote proctoring system that we use, but I don't think everybody thought about the connectivity or the privacy of where the person is at, and can they get to do they have the equipment that they need? So we had to kind of go back and take a look at that. It's not just going to be assessment on tests, because maybe we don't have that proctoring ability in all locations, but maybe you have to look, again, people who aren't used to teaching online, develop those discussions, develop those other forms of assessment. And that's going to take time for them to see all of that, because they're very used to that being the face-to-face, and then they take an exam in a location that's in the classroom. So that's another thing I think that's hard for some of our faculty to kind of wrap their mind around, that they have to now take a discussion that they might have had in the classroom and put it online and then grade it. It's more than just the technical aspect of it. It's just a whole different way of assessing students that they're not used to because they're in the classroom. One thing too that did come to mind is, for a student, one of the things that we're stressing for faculty is consistency. Even though everyone has their own way of doing something, I'm going to videotape my lecture, I'm going to put documents in, I'm going to have lots of discussion. Everyone has their own way of how they think they're going to teach their class. But we've asked them to be consistent and have a welcome page, because these students may or may not be used to this environment. So it's important to provide that consistency across all classes if you can, to welcome that student in, give them some very specific directions. And this is kind of going back to what Gretchen was saying, go back to the basics. I mean, I guess I kind of forgot about that because that's something I assumed everybody was doing. But now these faculty who don't have to have a welcome page because they welcome in their face-to-face classroom now have to think about, what would I say to them when they walk in the door, or do I do announcements, or how do I communicate with my students, and how are other faculty communicating, so that we are doing this consistently and not asking a student to do something 10 different ways in 10 different classes.
I think that's a good point. And I think that the other anxiety that our students are feeling at our community colleges, and Teresa and I have schools that are very similar to one another. We have students who are not as afraid of the coronavirus as they are of going online. And I took a career and technical program, a hands-on program, because I didn't want to read a book. I didn't want to do online. I wanted to be in the classroom with my instructor. And that's become the issue later this week. We went online Monday. Is, what do you mean I have to log on? I never check my email. And we got some real basics that we're trying to struggle with. At the same time, as an administrator, we're trying to figure out, do we let people graduate early, or are we going to extend the semester? How are we going to let students move back in the dorm? We now, I think, at NCC have a case of coronavirus. Are we getting refunds? What is our refund policy going to be? When will they get their refunds? How are we going to start registering for summer? The infrastructure of the college is taking a lot of energy away from time that we could go maybe spend with faculty. But I'm really impressed with how well, at least our college faculty have, and the whole college has jumped into this. It's been an honor. It's been impressive. And I think we'll be better at the end of the day because of what they're finally seeing. Oh, I could do this. Well, of course you could do this. We've been telling you could do this for 20 years, but oh, now I can do it because it was now immediate. It was necessary. I don't do things until I need them. I know what a wrench does, but I don't use it, so I don't think about it. Now I need a wrench, and it's good.
Very good. Well, let me see if I can round all this out with about as practical strategies I can think of for going online. I'm going to do it as quickly as I can. I want to be cognizant of everyone's time. I want to talk a little bit about something that is called generative learning. If you're not familiar with the book Make It Stick, this comes largely from some of the work of Bjork and Bjork out of Brown's book. And it's based on the notion that, quite honestly, what I'm about to share with you is easy to understand, but it's very difficult to implement. It takes a true master teacher to implement this sort of thing, but it really can help you online. The idea is simple. In the old mantra of tell, show, do, review, ask, we put the wrong word first. We put the word tell first. And so we tell and we tell and we tell. And then we sometimes have enough time for students to try something, but often we go straight to test. And that's really not best for students when it comes to learning. What's really better for them is to try to get them to do something first, even if they don't know how. In fact, especially if they don't know how. The easiest illustration I can give you, the most simplistic, is really something like this. This comes from Dan Meyer, the math teacher, who said, here's my Nana's best icing that she uses for all of her stuff. Unfortunately, I didn't add the right amounts, so how do I fix it? Now, students may or may not know how to deal with fractions. They may not know how to multiply, divide, subtract, add fractions. That may not be something they know how to do yet, but they'll take a shot. Most people will take a swing at this because they figure, well, maybe I can work my way into it. And then the instructor, the teacher, has this lovely coachable moment, this sort of facilitated moment to be able to go in and help them. Well, you can do it with anything. I can remember my statistics professors in my master's program talking to us, very simply about what's wrong with this, with the 4 out of 5 dentists recommend this gum, thing. And we would, without knowing any of the concepts in statistics, we would work our way back into some of these things that they could then come alongside now that we had some skin in the game, now that we understood how it worked. And we could say, well, here's what I think. And they could go, well, here's what you think is called this. And now let's explore it. Let's blow that out a bit. When you start from tell, you often then think, well, how do I demonstrate? How do I show? How do I, give them all the stuff that I need to do? And sometimes even those decisions can be bad decisions for learning. I think about if you're trying to teach the heart and you bring in a nice high fidelity, full of labels, high cognitive load, and something you speak to very quickly, like the heart here that you see, this would be very bad for a student who's never seen a heart before. Not only does it have too many labels for me, but I don't really have to use my imagination much. A much better sequence would be for me as a biology professor to say to a student, draw a heart. Just draw it. You draw it. Even though you've never seen one, you've never done, just draw a heart. We had professors that were doing this when I was the Chief Innovation Officer at St. Leo, and they would come in and see students draw something like what you see here. This was actually a student who drew this. And they were able to come alongside and say, now, wait a minute, why is it symmetrical? It shouldn't be symmetrical. And so the student doing it first really gave them a footstep, if you will, a foothold to be able to consult with them and facilitate. I use this in my communications classes. I have students debate on whether or not a video is a good presentation or not. And then over the semester, they figure out more and more and more information that maybe they picked the wrong videos as best, and they didn't pick the videos that were really the most effective as worst, and they can start to flip-flop those over time. And then I was thinking about it in this coronavirus, setting. I've been thinking obviously a lot about this. I know we all have. I hope you're not playing a drinking game at home for how many times I've touched my face today. I am quarantined, so I'm not spreading it around myself. But I was thinking about this piece that was done in the Times. It really speaks to the notion that we have a group of people in the world who don't know much about what's going on when it comes to expertise, where to look. A lot of this has become politicized. And so I was thinking about the experience of how long should we stay quarantined? How long should that actually happen? And you know, you could start by saying to your students, give me a number. How many days? 10 days, 15 days, 30 days? What's the right amount of days? And then you could present to them some information that will help them figure this stuff out kind of beyond. And you could actually use this times simulation to see what it would be like if you were to keep people quarantined for 30 days versus for 15. You can see how many less people would die, but you can also see how many less people take up hospital beds. And that's one of the real concerns, is that we only have, you know, roughly 600,000 hospital beds in this country. What do we do if they're all taken up by coronavirus patients, or if they're, you know, half are taken up by coronavirus patients? Now, you could use something like this in a math course. You could use something like this in a history course to talk about how we did this in the past with other pandemics. You could talk about it in an economics course in terms of what's the right time to try to get the country back up and running economically, versus how, you know, if we do it too soon, we'll just come to a grinding halt eventually anyway, and it will actually elongate the economics process. But you can start to look for other places that students can get information, meaning you don't have to tell and tell and tell and tell. You don't have to create 60-minute lectures and then have them try to fill out some worksheets. You can have them start by trying. And so I think I just wanted to end with the notion of generative learning by saying that this is really something we can do that can change the game. With regard to that, let me stop sharing first of all very quickly. Panelists, if you have any last thoughts, I'd love to hear what you think either about generative learning or just in general.
Well, first, thank you, Jeff, for giving us the opportunity to come together and share, and hopefully people do find it helpful. I think, you know, one of the things I remember most about online learning, and one of the concepts that I think you brought up very poignantly here, is that I became a better teacher after I was an instructional designer. So I was teaching face-to-face, and I came to eCollege and started working as an instructional designer, and started thinking about all these things that I could change and do differently face-to-face, as well as, of course, you know, how we could do it online. And I think a lot of it, again, goes back to that intentionality, and being able to formulate how we give students the opportunities to learn. And so I think, you know, when you're talking about good teaching is good teaching, whether it's online or on ground, and the concepts you were bringing up just now, Jeff, is, you know, they can be done online with intentional design and, you know, ways in which to bring out the content presentation or the lecture, along with the opportunities for students to do. And I think that's, you know, just as important face-to-face as well. So thank you.
Yeah.
Does this mean I get to go tell my faculty member that wants to record a 90-minute lecture for this new environment that they can't because you said so?
Yes.
Thanks.
Well, you know, you know how much I love being the litmus test for everything. Sure.
Yeah.
It occurred to me, and Jeff, I don't know if you did this activity, if it was someone else, and I apologize, I don't remember, but it sounds like something you would do if it wasn't you. A few years ago at a Pearson meeting, we were asked to divide into groups, and the situation was a pandemic, and we were each group was given a different aspect of society. There was marketing and news, and then there was the medical, and I thought of that the other day as this was happening. I mean, there's more than just the medical, but how does the media handle this? I mean, we all see what we see, but how in the backgrounds, how are they controlling what they do not to have everyone panic? And so I think if you do incorporate something like this, and it's a real live situation now into learning, it's meaningful. It is very meaningful for them. And it also lets you take a second to look at all of the aspects of society that are affected or that have to deal with it, and how they're changed by this.
That was me. We turned that into a course. We actually had
that's right. Yeah.
Universities from all over the country, all over the world actually, acting as different agencies in that experience, and I was just demonstrating it. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it was a good activity. I didn't really know I was going to have to live through it, but
yeah, I know.
I've always wanted a window in my office. It took a pandemic to get me home where I've got one.
Oh, Emma, any parting thoughts?
Just, you know, I think I was talking about this last week with a few other colleagues, and I think it's come up even as we've been talking today, in how we're presenting information to our students, to our faculty, to people who are learning to work remotely for the first time. And that is just not only about the intentionality, but being aware that all of our cognitive loads are like on overdrive right now. So I was trying to explain to my son's science teacher that it isn't just about the content, right? So helping them remember that the fact that she's using email and someone else is using the course messaging system and somebody else is using a whole different app means that I'm having to spend time, you know, with that mechanism of communication. And I think both Gretchen and Teresa talked about this as well, that we can't underestimate how much that adds to our respective cognitive loads in this circumstance, and how it really is really overwhelming for a lot of people. So sometimes over communication can be helpful, and sometimes it can be extremely paralyzing for people. So just being strategic about that, regardless of the group with whom you're communicating, can help people feel a little bit more in control of something that feels very much out of control.
I really just want to thank the panelists. You guys are great. I've known you all for so long and your friends, and thank you. I hope you listening have found some good stuff. Obviously, go back and listen to it as often as you'd like. Share it with your friends, and just good luck and good learning out there. Stay safe in this weird time. We'll all get through it, but enjoy going online as much as you can. And we'll maybe we'll try this again and see you soon. All right, thanks everybody.
Sounds good. Thank you.